What drew you to go ahead and do something on Aaron Rodgers?
Well, I was actually down to do a LeBron James biography, and unbeknownst to me, another LeBron book was in the works. It came out, and I had to pivot. And Aaron Rodgers got traded into my backyard, and I thought he was a pretty fascinating character from afar. And
Right.
also, Vince Lombardi coached at my high school, and Lombardi lived 8 houses away from my house in Englewood, New Jersey. So I was always fascinated by the Packers' mystique, and put those two things together. And I thought I always wanted to do a Packers book.
Right.
So even though Aaron Rodgers is now with the Jets,
Right.
I count him as a Green Bay Packer. So that's a major reason why I decided to do it.
Did he get into the situation on how ugly things got in Green Bay when the divorce was over, when the divorce happened with him and Brian Gutekunst, their relationship?
He did, and obviously that it got pretty ugly at the end, and it got ugly, of course, with Mike McCarthy at the end in 2018. But I really think, as much as the Packers were clearly eager to turn the franchise over to Jordan Love, just like they were from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, basically he lived the Favre experience. It was very similar. But I think he saw a perfect opportunity in New York with the Jets.
Right.
Tom Brady having 7 rings and Aaron only has the one. He's never closing that gap. But going to the big city and winning a championship for a franchise that has not been to the Super Bowl since January of 1969, I think if he pulled that off, I think most people in New York, it would almost feel like 3 rings that he won with just that one. So I think it was a combination of the Packers wanting him out and Rodgers wanting out and seeing a perfect opportunity for him in New York.
Yeah. What about his relationship with Mike McCarthy? I remember standing at his locker right after Mike McCarthy got fired, and they had a really close relationship, and then it kind of started going different ways.
Yeah, Rod, obviously their relationship now is better than it was at the end in Green Bay because I think they have a greater appreciation for what they shared together in the good years.
Right.
They won Aaron's only Super Bowl together, and you can't take that away from McCarthy or Rodgers. And they lit it up a lot of years. And that's what Aaron said. Aaron told me at his home in Malibu in his backyard on the Pacific Ocean that, yeah, we butted heads, no question about it. But we lit it up offensively a lot of years there. And you can't take that away from them. I think the one story I have in the book that I think is representative of their friction was before the probably Aaron's most devastating playoff defeat, the 2014 NFC Championship game collapse at Seattle, and 15 things had to go wrong in the final 5 minutes for them to lose that game, particularly the fumbled onside kick. But
By
Aaron,
Brandon
before that,
Bostic.
that's
Yeah.
right, by Bostic. And before that game, Aaron watched film of the Dallas Cowboys beating Seattle in the regular season that year, and Tony Romo lighting up the Seahawk defense, particularly on 6 plays. And Aaron told McCarthy, I want these 6 plays run over and over and over again in this game against Seattle. And McCarthy ran 3 of them one time each. And that really upset Aaron and was a factor in the outcome of that game.
Do you think he has a little bit of chip on how, like, they moved on from Favre, they moved on from him? Do you still think he has a chip on his shoulder that the fact that the Packers didn't want him anymore?
Absolutely, 100%, Rod. Yeah, that's it's a boulder, man. It's a giant rock on top, no question about it. And I think it goes back to his high school days, right? When he had no
Right.
scholarship offers, he was forced to play at the local community college, and the draft situation that day was humiliating to him, going from 1 to 24. And it feels like there's a lot of that in his career. But yeah, he experienced what Brett Favre did. Now he knows what Brett felt like in 2008. And Jordan Love is looks like another first ballot Hall of Famer. So the Packers did the right thing. But Aaron doesn't feel that way, and I don't blame him for everything he did for that franchise. But no question about it, though, he saw this, like I said, great opportunity in New York with the Jets. It has to hurt. I believe if the Jets made the Super Bowl, the one team he would want to face and beat in that Super Bowl is the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, let's talk about that press conference about COVID when they asked if he took the shot. That kind of changed everything. I mean, that just blew up worldwide. I mean, he discuss that when you were talking with him outside his pool?
Rod, he did. I asked him that question, and this is the way I positioned it. I said, I've been a columnist in New York for a long time. If I were a columnist for a Green Bay or a Milwaukee outlet sitting in that room, and I was vaxxed, but if you told your truth, his truth was he was allergic to an ingredient in Pfizer and Moderna and concerned about Johnson & Johnson side effects. And if you had just said that, I would have found that to be a somewhat reasonable position. And I really don't think I would have hammered you in my column that day.
Right.
And you would have gotten less than half the criticism you got in November when the truth came out. And
Right.
he basically said that he doesn't admit mistakes easily, or I don't remember him ever saying the words, "I'm sorry."
Sorry.
Yeah, but he did say it was a mistake. He regrets it. He wished he had just told his truth that day. And he understands that that was probably his biggest public relations mistake because that changed his life. That changed his image forevermore.
The estrangement from his parents. I mean, you don't see too many superstars that have estrangement from your parents. What do you think about that? And what do you think is the greatest cause on where they're at right now, which is haven't spoken since, almost 10 years?
Well, his parents believe, and by the way, Rod, I drove them to the 9/11 game last September.
I know
They
that
do
was
occasionally go to games. They went to some games at Lambeau, not many, but a home opener here or there. And it's the only time they ever get a chance to be in the same room with their son. It's a big room, but it's something. And so they believe, the parents, that Olivia Munn had a tremendous amount to do with this. He was dating her at the time the estrangement started in 2014, late that year. There are other family members who feel the same way, but he hasn't dated Olivia in 7 years. And so it certainly can't be all her fault. I think Aaron brought into that relationship feelings and issues he already had with his family, that the family revolved too much around his success and fame. There were too many connections to it. Also, he was very generous with family members. He didn't think that was fully appreciated.
right.
So, but when I looked at it from the outside looking in and thinking I'd find one defining moment or development that caused this, it doesn't exist. There are a lot of issues he had with his brothers had with him, but a lot of them seem fairly minor and petty. It's an accumulation of issues
Right.
that have created this estrangement, which has become a living being that he can't
Right.
kill off. He doesn't know how to kill it off. And that's why it's gone on for nearly 10 years.
As an author, I thought it was really cool when I found out a few weeks ago that you drove his parents to the game. What was it like being in that car with a mom and dad of a superstar kid who they haven't talked to? What was that car ride like? And what did you find out about them that you didn't know?
Yeah, well, really, that they very much still love their son. There's no question about that, and they have feelings, same kind of feelings as if they were talking to him all the time about being nervous before games. And I drove them into the MetLife Stadium parking lot, and there was actually an advertisement on a billboard of Aaron, and his mother Darla was kind of straining to see it. Is that Aaron? Is that Aaron? I remember her saying that, and it was him. And we talked about nerves before big games that they still feel. And Darla, in particular, said, as a mother, and he's the quarterback, that means there's a target on his back and the whole defense is after him. So I really worry about injury. And of course, hours later, 4 snaps into
Four
his
snaps
Jets
in.
career, he was out for the season with an Achilles tear. The surreal thing was driving them home. So what happened was I gave them the keys to my car, figuring they'll get to the car first. I have to go to the press conferences and in the locker room after the game. And also thinking that Aaron would have a press conference after the game, I put my radio on 98.7 ESPN in New York, which would have the post-game press conferences. I didn't know at the time that Aaron wouldn't be there at the end of the game, that his friend Aubrey Marcus would be driving him home with a torn Achilles. But uh, driving his parents home that night was, I really made myself an Uber driver where I didn't speak and I spoke if spoken to. And I let them sit in their silence and to some degree suffering. We did talk a little bit, but it was a pretty somber ride home.
Yeah, and I guess you initiated them to make the first move, talking about Ed going to the golf tournament. Can you get into that a little bit, which I thought was a really cool idea by you, because it seems like you kind of want to help. I know you want to kind of stay out of it, but you want to kind of help maybe bring these two sides together.
Yeah, as a journalist, you have to stay out of it. And as a
Yeah.
human being and a father sitting across a table in a cafe in Chico, California, and Ed was telling me, I think maybe Aaron wants to start the process of reconciliation, but I don't think he knows how to do it. He's trying to figure out a way. He doesn't know how to start. And I said, or make the first move. And I said, why don't you make the first move? And he said, yeah, I think I will. Now, he might have already been going to that golf tournament and it might have just been a passing thought. Of course, as a human being and father, I want to see the family get back together.
Right.
But he went and he put himself in the crowd at Lake Tahoe, the celebrity golf tournament Aaron plays every summer before training camp. And he wanted to be seen by Aaron and hope for an encounter. On
Wow.
the ninth hole on Saturday, Aaron saw him in the crowd and debated internally, should I go over there? Should I act like I didn't see him? And he decided to go over there. And Ed Rodgers, his dad, was looking away and turned around, and there he was, 15 feet away, looking at him. And he said he froze because he forgot what it felt like to have his son look at him
Right.
and to be in his presence. So Aaron hugged him. They each said, "I love you." And Ed was crying, and Aaron had to finish his golf tournament round, and so there was no follow up that I'm aware of after that. But Aaron did say on the record in the book, for the first time about any family member since estrangement started in 2014, I want to have a relationship with my father. He had not said that about anybody, so hopefully that is the first baby step towards reconciliation.
What was it like for you to go to his house, sit in his realm and talk to him about his life and talk to him about the book and things that you wanted to get? Was that intimidating to you by any ways, just because of what you've heard about him?
No, I really wasn't. I just felt I wasn't sure if he was going to, how much time he would give me. There was no set time. And I thought if he didn't like the line of questioning, he might kick me out of there after 25 minutes. And I flew 3,000 miles to see him, and there was a bomb scare on my plane, and we got diverted to Chicago for 8 hours. It was, I was afraid I was going to miss the interview. So we get there and we go to his backyard and sat down, and from a distance, and I've been again in New York, but I've always thought Aaron was like the best interview in the league. He
He
at the
is.
podium, at his locker, you would know, Rod,
Yeah.
he is thoughtful, and you may not love everything he's saying, but he doesn't speak in cliches. To me,
Yeah.
he's a reporter's
Great
dream
interview. Right.
for the most part, right? So you've had a number of exchanges and interviews with him, and I think he's pretty engaging and thoughtful. So I didn't know if he would talk about the family estrangement. I'm appreciative that he did on the record to some degree anyway. And also the COVID question, I thought would be a tense moment. It was maybe to some degree. We had a couple of tense moments, but for the most part, it was a 2 hour healthy give and take, a healthy sparring session. And he made the book a lot better.
What was your tensest moment with him in that backyard? And then how did you guys leave your interview?
I think it was when I told him there's not going to be much opinion in this book. And when it comes to the family estrangement, I'm hitting your brothers on just one or two things, but I think it's fair to hit you on something. You didn't go to a wedding, and you were in the wedding party of one of your best friends, a college teammate and buddy. And the reason, and at the last second, you bailed on the wedding, you bailed on your friend. You were in his party, and it was his day because he invited your family. And I think you should have risen above your issues that day for your buddy, and you were in the party to go and not
Wow.
tell him. Sources told me it was the day before. Some said it was the morning of or 2 days earlier. Aaron denied that, whatever. And I said, I think you were wrong. And he said, I respect your opinion. I think your opinion is wrong. And
Of
you're,
course he said that.
of course, he said he respected this erroneous opinion, but he said, you're uneducated to the complexity of the situation. My wife got a real kick out of that because she has said that to me about 1,000 times over the last 30 years. But he's probably, and he's right. It's hard to really get to the heart of any family fracture. And this one is very complicated, just like Aaron is. And so there were to me 15 different issues at play. A lot of them seem trivial and petty and minor. And it tells me that this estrangement should have died about 5 or 6 years ago. And unfortunately, it's still ongoing.
What did you get out of this writing this book? I'm sure you get something when you walk away. It's got to be a great accomplishment. When did you start? When did you finish? And just like, how much did it take out of your time? Like, how long did it take you to get this book, and what did you get out of
I left my job, my columnist job, and in the past, my previous 5 books, I had column jobs with ESPN.com or USA Today, the New York Daily News, and then finally with the New York Post. And I left it because I just needed to focus on this project, and I cost myself some money actually doing this book, but that's
it?
neither here nor there. But it is, it feels like you're taking 5 years off the end of your life. I hope not, but it's such a grind doing these unauthorized biographies. It's a fight every day to get information, to get the true story. And I don't know, maybe I think he saw that, and I think he saw that I had no agenda, and that's why he sat down with me at the end. Now, if I had full cooperation from him, we would have talked for 20 hours. I had to make those 2 hours at the end of the process work because that's all I was getting.
Right.
And I think it did work.
When you take a look at this book and his whole body of work, how do you think the world looks at him?
Right now, negatively, unfortunately. I think a lot of self-inflicted wounds. It started with COVID. but the conspiracy theories, the Kimmel thing was an unforced error, even though I don't think he intended to say what people thought he said about Jimmy Kimmel. But there's been things piled on here. And a guy who used to be considered one of the good guys in the NFL, socially aware, supported Kaepernick and the position of athletes to protest inequities in society. And yet he got really no credit for that. He also supported charitable causes for victims of the war in the Congo. And he did other things. And all of a sudden he became a villain. And I think he dug in and he was really frustrated by the fact that media members who had praised him in the past were now turning on him in his mind. And he decided, if you want a war, I'm going to give you one. And so right now, his public image is not a good one. I do think, and victory doesn't equal virtue, but we all know how it works in sports, Rod. If he wins a championship with the Jets, that's going to wipe away a lot of this.
What did the Packers locker? What did his former players? What do you think about what they thought about him during his time in Green Bay?
I talked to Jermichael Finley too. Greg Jennings did not call me back. And as you know, Rod, those are the two guys who always get sort of singled out as the critics, right?
Yeah.
So I was on a program with Nick Wright, First Things First, I went to the studio in New York, and Greg was on the panel that day. He was serving as one of the hosts. And he said to Greg, Aaron said the other day on TV that I reached out to 500 people and 250 talked to me. Well, you're one of the 250 who didn't return my message. So we had a little fun with that. But I said, Greg, I know 93% of the stuff you have said about Aaron has been positive. The other 7% has gotten all the attention, but I respect that 7% because you put your name on it and you weren't an anonymous source.
Right.
And Jermichael Finley put his name on it too. And you guys are very distinguished NFL players. You have the right to criticize Aaron, just like he has the right to criticize others. Now, I found, including those two guys for the most part, that the vast majority of NFL players who have competed with Aaron and been his teammate love him.
Right.
And I was surprised by that, to be honest with you, Rod, because I didn't cover him like you did on a daily basis. I had one NFL longtime official tell me that he did not like Aaron Rodgers, but he knew hundreds of players in his years in the league. And he said, I have to admit, I've never met an NFL player who doesn't like him. So that never seems to get discussed when people talk about Aaron Rodgers. I don't know why, but the people he spends the most amount of time with, the players, they all seem to, or 99% of them seem to really like him. And I do think that should count for something.